Now, some of you in the comment section, it might have been more over in the members section, I'm not 100% sure, but several of you have asked me if I would do a video about books that kind of pulled me down the rabbit hole, what books kind of got me here. And I've done a few videos on this topic before, not necessarily about specific books, but just about the thinking of like what things happened in the world that kind of changed my thinking, stuff that I watched unfold, like the Iraq War and stuff like that. And that led to some of you asking about, what books had kind of opened my eyes to things. And so tonight I have 7 books that influenced me greatly, and I'll get into that and how I got each one of these books. So be prepared for some rabbit trails there. I know there's some people that like that stuff and some that do not. So you have been warned well in advance. So again, 7 books that kind of took me down the rabbit hole. And as I've mentioned in previous videos, really my journey into a lot of these parapolitical topics really started more seriously in 2000. But early 90s was when I first started hearing some of the crazy stories and stuff that I'll get into here. Anyway, so without further ado, let's jump right in. So one of the first books that I got, that I actually had to special order at Barnes & Noble after I read an article by Richard Sauter, Dr. Sauter, in UFO Magazine sometime in like 96 or so. And in that article that he had written, they mentioned that he had just come out with this book, Underground Bases and Tunnels, What is the Government Trying to Hide? And I believe Dr. Sauter's PhD is in political science. And he's definitely one of those guys. He now resides in Ecuador. And he's one of those guys I would love to, if I could ever find a way to get down to Ecuador, I would love to sit down and talk with him at length about this kind of stuff. Back in the mid-90s, especially early 90s to mid-90s, a lot of people were starting to connect the dots between a lot of political intrigue with like George Bush's mention of the New World Order in his 1991 speech. I think it was on September 11th of 91 when he said that, or at least that's when it's credited to him. But a lot of people were connecting the dots for a lot of that kind of stuff and realizing that there was a lot more to the UFO phenomenon than just flying saucers and that sort of thing. The people were realizing like Area 51 first became kind of a thing to talk about in the like 1989, 1990 or so. So the secret base aspect really fascinated me. The whole idea that there was possibly captured UFO technology, alien technology. And the more I got into that, the more I started to realize that there's a lot more than just the alien aspect is, I personally believe, at least to me, the evidence that I've accumulated points to the alien cover story being kind of a way to distract and discredit a lot of leaks of a lot of leaky information that comes out of these aerospace companies and things, and a lot of these secret programs, and makes them easily deniable. And then I think it also serves a bigger propaganda purpose, but that's topic for another video. But anyway, this is all about secret underground bases. And excellent book. If you don't have this one, it's a good one to get. It's a lot of this information you could probably find online, but it's here compiled in great form. And Richard Sauter is a good writer, and he does a good job of saying when he's speculating and when he doesn't know, he says, I don't know. So I appreciate his candor there. But the thing about this book that really got me down the rabbit hole, because obviously when I got this, I, believed there were definitely, strange aircraft flying around in the skies. But the thing that got me was in the back here, there's a couple of articles, and I think I've since run down these issues of UFO Magazine, where Chapter 7, Nuclear Testing, the EPA, Abductions, Animal Mutilations, and Aliens, ? And there's a few chapters, a couple of chapters at least in here, where he gets into how the alien abduction phenomenon and the cattle mutilation phenomenon could be the byproduct of some very advanced chemical warfare testing. It could also be monitoring radiation that has spilled over from a lot of these nuclear sites and uranium mines that nobody really wants to sound the alarm out loud on because of the panic that that might cause. So he puts out a few different theories on that, and he points out some very terrestrial technology that could be used to accomplish the supposed alien endeavors. And that was one of the first times that the whole alien thing facade kind of cracked a little bit, and I started to rethink, maybe it's not little gray men flying around in spaceships. Maybe there's something else going on. So excellent book. And for that, just for that particular angle alone, and one of the things he does in here is goes over a lot of old Army Corps of Engineer paperwork and a lot of these geological studies about spots that were good potential sites for secret underground bases and that sort of thing. And we're talking sites that are like over a mile deep. I mean, we're talking way beyond the cut and cover construction of like the 50s, where a lot of the early nuclear stuff was what they call cut and cover, where they dig a hole, build a bunker inside it, and then cover it with earth or concrete. And the kind of facilities that were being designed and planned in the late 60s, 70s, and early 80s are much more sophisticated. Like we're talking very deep underground, thousands of feet underground. And as he points out, there's a lot of this stuff, it goes black after a point. Like there's geological surveys and there's certain amounts of information where they're kind of doing fact finding for a particular project. But then when it actually goes into skips over from planning to actually doing, then the trail goes cold. So anyway, excellent book on that. And again, that's one that kind of really made me rethink the cattle mutilation thing and look into that a little bit deeper. Now, this one is Cal Lasson. I think I'm saying this guy's name right. This is Culture Jam by Cal Lasson. And this was published, I believe, in '99. Let me see. Oh, and by the way, just for the viewing pleasure of all of you, this is from '95, but I got it in '97. 1999. So this is one that I found because a lady I worked with, it's kind of funny, I didn't smoke, but I hung out with all the smokers. So when they went on smoke break, I'd go hang out outside with the smoking folk, and we would talk all kinds of crazy things happening in the world. And one afternoon when we were out having our usual conversation about this stuff, this lady was like, hey, I read this article the other day, and I forget what magazine it was in, but she's like, it's like the kind of stuff you talk about not having a TV and, avoiding pop culture and that sort of thing. And I was like, huh. So the next day she brought this article, and she's like, yeah, this is like, if I didn't know any better, I'd think you wrote this. And so I'm like, oh, now I'm intrigued, because what is it? What kind of crackpot lunacy is this? And it was actually a really good article, and it was written by this guy. And it was all about the effects of pop culture on our psyche and the way we take in the world around us, and just how much that's perverted our lived experience to have now social media. But back then it was mainly people sitting around watching TVs, where they would discount their own lived experience in favor of what they were seeing on TV. And this is by no means a conspiracy book or anything like that, but it's a great critique of popular culture and just how absurd some of the things is, like measuring things based on gross domestic product, like judging a country by GDP rather than all these other actual human achievements. So, excellent book. And this is one that will definitely get you stepping back from mass media and rethinking it, because books like this do a good job of, if you take them and apply this information unbiased, you won't be like, oh, Republicans bad, Democrats good, or vice versa. You start to see how both parties exploit mass movements and mass media to meet their ends. And you see that there's a lot of the Hegelian dialectic, the kind of fake warring of cultures is designed to keep us in very specific places. And again, that's not really his point of writing this book. His point is mainly just about popular culture and the harmful effects thereof. But anyway, excellent book. And this is another one that just kind of cracked that door a little bit. Now, moving on, it was right around the same time that I got this one that I special ordered this. And this was the early days of the interwebs. And I think this was about spring of 2000 or so. It might have been spring of 2001. But I had read this book, and I had found Richard Sauder's website. And so I was looking around his site, and he had a section of recommended books, and this is one of them. So that was kind of one of my first. I didn't really start exploring the internet until very late 90s, early 2000s. So anyway, so went to, back then, again, this is pre-Amazon, so I went to Barnes & Noble and asked them if they could special order this book for me, and here it is. And this is kind of a crazy one to look up on Amazon because it fluctuates all over the place. Sometimes it'll be really like reasonably priced, like 15, 20 bucks. And then there's one time I was recommending it to someone and they're like, dude, do you realize that's like $100 book? So, and then I go back and check, I checked like a month or so ago when I mentioned this book, and it was back down to more reasonable rates. So I don't know if somebody stumbles into another like case of these books somewhere and that lowers the price or what. But so anyway, this is Milabs or MyLabs, Military Mind Control and Alien Abduction by Dr. Helmut Lamer and Marion Lamer. I believe they are husband and wife authors. And excellent book about the alien abduction phenomenon, and more specifically, all the accounts that are kind of strained out a lot of the mainstream narratives of UFO alien abduction lore, like Bud Hopkins did a lot of research into alien abductions back in the 80s and 90s. And a lot of the stuff that didn't fit neatly into that alien bin got thrown out. And you can make your own guess as to why Mr. Hopkins would do that. But a lot of the accounts that weren't kind of sanitized would talk about when people were regressed hypnotically and remembering their alien abduction experiences. A lot of them were seeing people in military garb and remembering like being thrown in the back of a van and taken somewhere, or helicopters coming and landing and picking them up, and being taken to very terrestrial laboratories with people in lab coats working on them. And in some cases, people very obviously wearing costumes to look like aliens. So lots of stuff there that's very intriguing. And again, this is one of those that I was like, wait a second. So the alien abduction thing, there might be more to that than, again, just aliens. This is a guy that, again, he's a German author, and he's written some books in German that you can look up on Amazon. And I've got one of them, but I would need one of you fine viewers fluent in German to translate it. But this is his only book that is in English, at least that I'm aware of. But he's one of those authors, too, that I would love to see what he would say now if he was to come back and revisit this topic, what he might add to that. Because very fascinating accounts in here. And overall, this is pretty brief. And I would imagine now he could probably write a book 5 or 6 times this length with all that's transpired just in the last 20-some years. But excellent book, really looking at the military angle of alien abductions and possible breeding and cloning experiments. And there's a lot of really strange things that people have reported happening in alien abduction experiences. And when you look at it in the context of somebody possibly being used as a guinea pig or test subject for a certain black program, then some of the weirder alien stuff starts to make a little bit more sense because, anyway, so that's excellent book on that topic. And again, that's definitely one that pulled me down the rabbit hole because again, this is more on the aliens being used as kind of a convenient cover for a lot of black programs. And I should mention, I'm wearing my Pfizer shirt, and I'm not a Pfizer rep or anything. I made this shirt a while back and had a buddy of mine that has a t-shirt shop print them up, and he said, I will print these shirts for you, but you cannot tell anybody I did this for you. So I was like, no problemo. So anyway, I am not a Pfizer rep, but it says, Pfizer, we're making a killing. It's a funny joke because, reasons. So anyway, moving right along, this is, just wanted to get that out of the way. This is a good way to see who's paying attention. I wore this shirt in a few older videos and had people saying, you can't trust this guy. Look, he's shilling for Pfizer. Like, oh, silly people. Now, this is one I also found around the same time because after getting this book, I started looking in Borders books and Barnes & Noble, started looking around. They used to have, in some of the stores, they would have a speculation section. That was kind of the polite way to talk about some of these topics. And Borders actually had this. This is Mind Control, World Control, the Encyclopedia of Mind Control. And this is one that I got because I was like, oh, come on, please. This is absurd. This is just crazy talk. But I was like, for $14.95 was the going rate at the time. And I was like, for $14.95, I'm gonna go down the rabbit hole and see. And I was blown away. This is a book by Jim Keith. This was originally published, I want to say this is also like 97 or 98 or so, 97. But the more of this I read, I was kind of slightly terrified because the more I tried to debunk it, and again, this was early stages of the internet, and I would go online and look up some of the stuff he was mentioning. And I was kind of horrified to find out that a lot of the stuff he was talking about was a very real thing. At first, I remember when I brought this over to my parents and to show them, because I was right in the middle of it, and I was like, "Y'all get a load of this book. This has got some crazy stuff in it." And my dad's like, "Oh, that's like that John Birch Society kind of stuff. That's the stuff they were talking about." But again, that doesn't make it any less true or accurate. So lots of fascinating stuff, and it is kind of like the name implies there, Encyclopedia of Mind Control. This is more kind of a sampling of it's more like a series of articles than really a book per se. And as I've said in other videos, I love this kind of book just because these are easy to read in short sections. So back when I had jobs where, I'd be making a mold over here, doing something where I had 30, 45 minutes to blow while I was waiting for something to cure or whatever, then I'd have a book like this sitting by and read as much as I could while I was waiting for something to happen. So anyway, excellent information on mind control. And it's almost like a bibliography, a book-length bibliography, because he mentions a lot of other books that a lot of people had never heard of. This is where I found out about George Estabrook's book Hypnosis and the military applications of hypnosis, and also Operation Mind Control by Walter Boert. All of those are mentioned in here. So some really good information. And Jim Keith is, again, one of those writers that sadly he passed away from kind of a fluke accident after he had like a knee injury at the Burning Man, and then he went and had surgery on his knee and then never woke up from the surgery. And there's a lot of different theories about who he might have upset, but he was writing some pretty good stuff. And there's rumors that he might have been Commander X, which was a pseudonym for someone who was writing a lot of conspiracy stuff back in the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s. And a lot of the Commander X stuff, as sensational as it was at the time, a lot of that has now turned out to be true. So anyway, good information about mind control, because as I think most people watching this video, if you haven't gone that far down the rabbit hole, there's a lot of people, I know myself included, in, when I first read this, my reaction was, we have free will, that no one can force another person to do something against their will. So just that very concept of free will and the way we think about it, when you start really looking into mind control, you get into some really terrifying realities there that you start realizing that we do have free will, but it can be subverted and through high technology. So interesting stuff there. And I don't want to blow it yet to my surprise, but I have a really interesting thing to share with you guys probably in the next couple of weeks or so. That I think I'll probably do a deep dive in the member section when this thing arrives in the mail, and then I'll talk more about it. Now, this is Toxic Sludge is Good for You. And one of you, I don't want to put names out there. I don't want to soil anyone's good name by mentioning them on this channel, but one of you saw my recommendation for this book, went out and got it, and did a review on your own channel. So congratulations. I'm glad the book gospel is spreading and more people are waking up to this sort of thing. But this Toxic Sludge is Good for You I didn't get this until 2000, I think late 2000, maybe very early 2001. This was originally published in 1995. Excellent book on the public relations industry. Again, there's a lot of this stuff. You can find YouTube videos that probably go a little bit deeper into some of this, but at the time, you just couldn't get this information easily. And this is, again, one of those that it's written definitely from a left-leaning perspective, but again, if you apply this information without bias, you realize really quick that it applies to everybody. And this is sadly one of those books that some of these authors, I don't think if they now, with the political climate being what it is, I think there's a lot of people that would not touch these topics because they would be terrified of the implications for their career by doing so. But pre-internet, this kind of stuff was around. So, and of course, Trump, I think, broke a lot of people's brains where Orange Man Bad just turned off the thinking. But anyway, all about the public relations industry and some fascinating case studies. Probably one of the most eye-opening at the time when I read this was the story of Naira, the girl that was the daughter of the Kuwaiti ambassador, I believe, that was coached on how in acting to give this fake testimony to help start the first Iraq War. And that's one of those things that I still meet people that don't realize that, that don't realize that a lot of the footing for the first Iraq War was all bogus, was all fabricated. And no one like Hill and Knowlton, the PR agency that did that, they chalked this up as a huge success story that they were able to accomplish this. And I think, I can't remember if I'm quoting this book or wherever, or where this is from, but someone attributed this quote at some point to George H.W. Bush Sr., that he said, if people knew what we did, I'm talking about fabricating all this stuff to start the war, they would chase us down the street and hang us from lampposts. But lots of good stuff about public relations industry, the public relations industry, how it works, how it's used to falsify public opinion, make people think that certain movements are organic when they are not. So again, this is one of those that also the bibliography alone on this is worth it just to go into their source material and look into more of this kind of stuff. But excellent book about the public relations industry. Because again, when you realize that Hill and Knowlton basically put their hallmark on the Iraq War Part 1, and they're proud of it. They don't deny it. This isn't like some shady conspiracy theory. Like, it's fact, and you can easily prove and verify that. Now, this is kind of out of order. I started getting more into looking into hypnosis. When I started looking into mind control and all of that, I started looking for books on hypnosis. And I really started digging into that around 2006, end of 2006, early 2007 or so. And I went to my local library and I found books on, that was when I was living in Dallas County, and Dallas County has some great libraries. So I was kind of shocked at the library that was by my house, which is a huge library, only had like 3 books on hypnosis. I'm like, what gives? That's crazy. So then I started looking around at half-price books, as I am wont to do, and found this. And even though this is a pretty basic book on self-hypnosis and hypnotic techniques and all, it has a really fascinating section that I did a video on this the other night about television being a tool of hypnosis, that television basically puts you into a hypnotic trance. And I'll link that video at the end, but there's a lot of fascinating stuff in this about the way your mind works, the way habits are formed, and that sort of thing. And that really got me looking a lot deeper into hypnosis. And over the next few years after I read this, I started actually getting much deeper into the hypnotic literature and looking for much more hypnotic kind of stuff. Now, last but not least, this is definitely my favorite. I actually got this in, I want to say fall. Actually, no, spring of 2002 is when I got this. So this is Into the Buzzsaw, Leading Journalists Expose the Myth of a Free Press, and edited by Christina Borgeson. I don't know if I'm saying that name right. Excellent book. This is definitely one that get your hands on this book. It's a great book. It's another one of those that's a compilation book, so it's one that you can easily read in chunks. But the whole thrust of this book, and the reason I got this was kind of funny story with that. At our local NPR station in Dallas, they were having a pledge drive, and the pledge drives, I don't know what they're like now, but used to in the old days, the pledge drives were a real mixed bag as far as they would drag out content that they would never do otherwise, because they were trying to keep people on, listening in while they were, panhandling for your money. So they had this lady on to talk about this book, and she was a reporter that was covering the TWA, I think it's flight. Oh, let's see. I think it's TWA flight 800. Let me look it up really quick, because that's a fascinating one to look into. And my clock's about to strike. Apologize for my antique clock there, but TWA Flight 800, that's the one that took off from, I believe, from New York, and then allegedly exploded from some kind of bizarre fuel tank explosion, and killed everybody on board. And initially there were witnesses that were all saying, oh yeah, we saw a missile shoot up from the water and blow up this plane. And there were a lot of witnesses, and I think there were even some pictures. And crazy story about this, I actually met a guy who had been in the Navy at that time, who confided to me that he had actually overheard the broadcast where they realized they had just shot down a civilian airliner. So she, in her section in this, she talks about how she was covering that story of TWA Flight 800, and it was very obvious from the autopsy reports and just all the information from eyewitnesses and everybody else that this plane was hit by a missile. Now, whether or not it was a missile from a misfire from a military test, that I think there's pretty strong evidence supporting that it was a misfire, like they were supposed to be like firing at a drone or something and didn't expect an airliner in this area and accidentally shot down a plane load of civilians. But when she started looking into that and realizing like the damage to the people, the injuries that the people sustained on the plane and all that these were fatal injuries, I might add, that their wounds were consistent with shrapnel from a missile, the little pellets that shoot out from a missile like that. And when she started reporting that accurately, she got thrown to the dogs, or thrown into the buzzsaw, where you get the name of the book. And that is the colloquial term amongst reporters, or at least was back in the 90s, for when you cross some invisible line that destroys your career. And that's what Christina did when she started talking honestly about Flight 800 and looking into that, and her career was destroyed because of it. And she went around after that, and she rounded up a bunch of her fellow black sheep in the press and compiled this book of their stories, of all kinds of stories of people who, other reporters, who were doing great until they reported on a certain story that was not supposed to be talked about, and that was nuclear for their career. Gary Webb is one in here. He talks about his experience with the San Jose Mercury News, reporting on the crack epidemic and tracing a lot of the drugs to the CIA. And there's a bunch of really good accounts in this about a lot of different topics. Let's see. And this is another one of those too. There's a couple of them in here that you're feel kind of propaganda-ish, but most of these accounts are pretty solid and still hold up really well. Mainstream Media, Chapter 13, The Drug Wars Shills, and this is all about how the drug war is bogus. And anyway, lots of really good stuff. And this is another one of those that's kind of a loose thread in the tapestry. And if you just take some of the information in this and start pulling at those threads, a lot of stuff starts to open up. And as long as you aren't mired in some kind of political ideology where you feel like you have to protect the Democrats or you have to protect the Republicans, if you aren't stuck in that kind of mindset, then you can go far with a book like this and unravel a lot. And it becomes a lot easier to spot when you see the partisans doing just that, where they're trying to keep you in a specific political camp. And most of these books are pretty good about not doing that. And that's why I chose these, is because they're not, there's some that are, Michael Moore had several that had some good stuff in it back in the 90s. There was some good information, but kind of like his documentary about, or his movie, I should say, about 9/11, Fahrenheit 9/11. There's some really good information, and then there's some really potentially deadly disinformation to steer you right back into specific political camps. So anyway, I will stop there. I've gone on way longer than I intended to, but I hope that you all found that edifying. And again, I've done probably full-length treatments of these books elsewhere on my channel, so definitely check that out if you're curious. And definitely check out the playlists on the channel, because again, I'm going through and updating a lot of those, and a lot of good information, a lot of the older reviews that back when the channel had 20 subscribers, and a lot of those didn't get many views, but still really good information. So anyway, I will stop there, but definitely check the end screen. And as always, thanks for watching. And for all of those of you who are members of the channel, I really appreciate your support. That is, of course, what is helping fund my book habit these days. So big thanks to all of you members. And I have some exciting new some more stories and things I'll be dropping in the member section soon enough. So again, thanks for watching.